All right, good afternoon. I'm Amy Scott, the Vice President of Research and Interpretation, and the Marilyn B. and Calvin B. Gross Curator of Visual Arts at the Autry Museum of the American West. First, I would like to thank our presenting sponsors, Sandy and David Berman, for making this program possible. And to all of our 2021 master sponsors, thank you so very much for your support, which means a great deal to us in the midst of what has been a very difficult year for everybody and museums everywhere in particular. I am most honored, along with the Autry trustees and staff, to welcome you to the Autry Artist Salons. Joining me today from his studio in Taos, New Mexico is Mark Maggiori, one of our featured artists. Hey, Mark, in the 2021 Masters of the American West exhibition and sale. Mark first joined Masters in 2018, just 3 short years ago, quickly racking up several awards, including the Patron's Choice Award in 2018 and the Spirit of the West Award in 2019. Like his predecessor, Henry Francois Farny, another Frenchman who made his way west in the 1880s in search of Western subjects, Mark has carved a unique place for himself within the art world, skyrocketing to national attention with work that embodies the sensitive realism of a painter like Farny, as well as the bold, super-saturated colors we see in works by the Taos Society of Artists, or perhaps even more appropriately, the cinematic gloss of Hollywood's golden era and its iconic director, John Ford. I first met Mark sometime in 2017 during a studio visit at a small apartment he had rented in Hollywood. I remember an old stucco building on a crowded street and circling the block a few times, looking for parking before dragging my then 2-year-old up a narrow staircase, only to find what can be best described as one of the most astonishing works of contemporary Western art that I had seen outside of a museum. I can't remember if I offered Mark a place in the Masters right then and there, but if I didn't, I should have. Because that painting, a large work called West of the Rio Grande, caused a small stampede at the Autry the following year. And Mark has been, of course, enlivening the Masters ever since with his vibrant work and his equally vibrant persona, which I can only describe as somewhere between a Western maverick and hipster rebel, equal parts Paris, Los Angeles, and now Taos. Having known Mark for a few years, it is entirely clear that wherever his style comes from, and we're going to try to figure that out a little bit today, it is as authentic as it is unique, relatable in a way that is opening the West to new generations and ensuring that the genre will continue to endure, even as the chasm of time that separates us from the historical frontier continues to grow. In the few short years since that first visit, Mark has come a long way from his Hollywood studio. We'll be talking today about that journey, his fascination with the West, and the formation of his artistic DNA, from his training in France to some of the historical artists he admires, including those whose work was inspired by the very place he is today, Taos, New Mexico. And lastly, a personal note. The Autry means something very different and unique to each of us. For me, this space, even in its virtual form, offers a lens into some of the many landscapes, cultures, peoples, and of course, artists that represent the diversity of the West, its physical beauty, and its complex history. It is that breadth of vision that endures as one of the defining strengths of our institution. So welcome, everybody, and thank you, Mark, so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So I have to say, I'm rather jealous of you in Taos right now. I missed out on my annual New Mexico trip this year, which means I'm like jonesing hard for Santa Fe around this time of year. But a beautiful setting. And Rob, if you want to get to the first slide. So I thought we would start, actually, although this looks like Taos, and it is, I want to start a little bit back even further west by way of the east, which would be France. And with the formal training that you did there and how that shaped your interest in the West. I think it's really important to note that a lot of the artists that inspire your work, including, of course, many of the historic Taos Society greats like E. Martin Hennings that we see here on the work alongside your master's painting for 2021, which is amazing. Were trained in Europe, although Henning's more in Germany than France. But of course, the Taos Society was in many ways a product of academic training in Europe. So, where did you first encounter Western art, and what did you think of it?
Well, it's an interesting question because I actually I discovered Western art in America. I would say 2012 or 13, something like that, and I was in Oklahoma City, and it's my father,
Oh.
the father of my wife, who advised me because I was taking photos of rodeos a lot, going taking Polaroids and stuff because I was directing music video for a living back then. And so I was shooting the nationals in Oklahoma City, and it was like, well, you should check out the Heritage Museum. And so I went on my own, and I entered that room with all the Pretty West winners. There's like a big room, and I went face to face with that James Reynolds painting called Arizona Boys, and I guess this painting struck me, and I had like a revelation at this moment. And then start looking at the room, and I stayed like 2 hours, and it was like all of a sudden everything I liked came together on paintings. And honestly, from maybe seeing like a few Remingtons, I had never seen anything before that was Western art, because tell you the truth, in France it's really unknown. And back then I was still, sharing my time between France and here, I mean, in America. And yeah, I wasn't roughly familiar with that. And so from that one day, I was like, I stopped. I mean, it took me a year or two before I could really stop everything I was doing, but I kind of like, reverse the boat whole life, because I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to paint the West, because I was already familiar with all the landscape and all, because that was kind of my playground. I was collecting vintage back then on the side of doing music videos. And so Patricia, my wife, and I, we were spending like days, weeks on the road, just like going places everywhere. So the landscape was already there in me, but I know there was a painting language attached to it. And of course it brought me back to my studies. Like in France, I studied at the Académie Julian, and I learned very academical drawing back then, and a little bit of painting, but I took painting on my own mostly. But mostly out there, I learned drawing, which is the base of everything. um yeah, I really enjoyed the work of especially the older artists, like James Reynolds and all the CA guys from the 60s. And even before that, of course, when I discovered Frank Tinney Johnson, and then the Taos Artist Society, I loved it because they are so well trained, and you can tell in their in their painting is so in many ways. And so it really echoed in my head. And yeah, then I that's all I wanted to do, and I started painting in 2014.
It's really interesting that you trained at the Academy Julian, because, of course, that is where Burt Phillips meets Ernest Blumenschein and Joseph Henry Sharp. And, the roots of the Taos Society is the Academy Julian, and sort of that really serious academic training. But so while you were working in France and in the Academy, did the American West ever come up? Is it something that the French were thinking about at all? And if so, what?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
No.
No, honestly, nothing. Like, not even like I said, I've never seen anything before. All I was influenced back in art school by John Sigrid Sargent, Joaquin Soria, Manet, all the European artists. And the most American I knew was Sargent. And we never know if he's supposed to be American, French, or Italian. Everybody's battling his nationality. But anyway, yeah, it really was for me a discovery when I was here in America. And now it's very interesting to see that a lot of French people that follow me on Instagram are actually discovering Western art through my work. And yeah, it's super cool. And to you, just a funny story regarding the Académie Julian. So I was in residence for 3 months at the Chaos House here in Taos, while my studio was being built. And so it was already a trip to be there and knowing their history and my story, which is very similar, 100 years apart. And then Davison Koenig, who works there, came to me with the book that is just released about, cows. And so he offered me the book, and I just grabbed the book and I opened it randomly. And the first page where I opened, it says, Paris, yours, Académie Julien. And I'm like, dude. And so I told Davison, I was like, man, that's the school I went to. And we were like tripping because it get more and more like all tingled together. And it's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So that's really, really amazing.
There's an awesome like symmetry and sort of like 360, I think, to your ending up in Taos and at the Cows House, no doubt, for all of those reasons. Rob, if you want to pull up the next slide, I think you mentioned Frank Tenny Johnson, and this is one of your paintings next to one of his. So let's move out to Hollywood now and talk a little bit about your work in LA. Frank Tenny Johnson, of course, was out here in the 20s, and like a lot of artists during that time, painted for some of the major studios, and he did cinematic backdrops and things for theaters. And so his work, has a narrative quality, but also more of sort of an action and adventure quality that I kind of tend to think of has similarities to the emergent Western film industry. Also, like the day-glow colors, like the super saturated skies and the really oranges and bright hues that permeate the landscape and the work of both of you. So did Hollywood, LA, anything about film play a role in how your work matured? Or was it really more history or landscape or other aspects of Western art?
Well, I mean, I ended up in Los Angeles because, so back in France, pretty much from the time I finished art school, I started working in animation. And then from animation, I got opportunities to start directing music videos. And so for 10 years, I was directing music videos live. I totally dropped the pencil and the brushes. And I was just always, directing stuff, traveling a lot. Coming to America to shoot stuff. And of course, when you direct music videos and then commercials, your goal is that you want to do a feature film. That's what directors want to do. So as a French man in my 30s, my dream was to, come to Los Angeles to make a movie. So that's what I did in 2010. I directed a feature film called Johnny Christ that we financed with private money from France. And it was like a crazy, amazing adventure. We shot in Arizona for 2 months, but then nothing happened with that movie because we went back to France and we were trying to find a distribution in America, being French, and we realized that there was it's a whole system that you need to be part of from the get-go, and it's not like just jumping in Hollywood and be like, hey, nobody needs you there. And I realized that, so I moved to Los Angeles pretty much, and starting, we were trying to find opportunities for the movie and nothing happened. And it was amazing because that kind of makes me realize, okay, maybe I'm not made for that. Like maybe nobody needs me. Nobody, there's millions of directors, everybody in every cafe talks about the movie they're working on. And it was like, to me, it was kind of like a reject. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to let you guys do that. And that's not what I want to do. And at the same time, I discovered the Western art. It was a parallel, it not happened just in one day, but it was slowly, I was slowly mourning my idea of becoming this director that I wanted to be, and then grabbing painting. So, of course, by directing for 10 years and being behind a camera, I've learned to frame and composition, because then before that I was doing storyboard for animation. And so I think my strength in painting is actually the framing, and that happens when I take my material, because I still do that so much. I go shoot stuff and I get my own material and models, and that's really when the painting happened. Honestly, that's funny that when I come back from a photo shoot, I already know the paintings that are here, and then it's happening in the studio. It's months and hours painting, but the real thing happened when I shoot. That's when I get the essence of things and really attached to the figure, to the person I'm meeting, and it's this whole feeling and thing that creates the painting.
So you have a
yeah.
painting in mind when you come back into the studio, have the image in your
What
head.
was that?
You have the painting in mind by the time you get back to the studio. You have the image in your head.
Yeah, because pretty much I built my photo shoot before, so
Mm-hmm.
I know where I'm gonna go. I have, you know, references in mind. I have dreams of what I want to see. I try to make it happen, and more I'm able to do it because I know more people. I have, you know, more resources, so I can really put together good stuff. And then when I get to the shoot, then I have a certain amount of time where it needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And 3-4 hours when I'm here with my camera on the subject and whatever I staged, and I have to get the right thing. And so what I'm saying is that, you know, at the end of the shoot, I know, okay, at that moment there was something, and I have in my head, and then I go back to the studio and I look through photos, and then yeah, here they are. There's that magic one, and it's so funny because you can like look through 100 pictures, and there's one who is the actually
Uh-huh. Well, that is really cool, because I wanted to ask you actually about the role of photography in your work. Rob, if we can go back to the Frank Tenny Johnson slide again real quick. So for an image like this, do you shoot, you know, the image of this, yours being the painting on the left, of course. Do you shoot in the round? And what about color? Because in perhaps even the next slide, Rob, if you want to advance one more. This slide, Mark's image being on the right, when it comes to color, it seems to me to be especially cinematic. Like there's something about this painting in particular, which was in the Masters, I think, year before last.
No, that was last year.
Same hat you're wearing. Has a particularly kind of like cinematic color to me. I don't know, but I think of like John Ford films. Like there is something with the sky and the drama of the sky, and then the deep space within the landscape that is particularly Hollywood. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the dramatic aspect is really something that I'm always looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, but when I take photos, because all the elements on that paintings have been photos I've taken. So sometimes I just do trips for clouds. Now I have clouds on my window all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mesa, it's like stuff I'm taking when I go shoot, you know, in Arizona. I'll grab those landscape and paint plein air. And so I'm always looking for that, you know, dramatic thing. But in my mind, when I shoot subject, I always have color grades of ideas of feelings that come from movie. I never refer to any paintings. Like I and even when I'm composing or anything, I'm never looking at other people painting, because that's, you know, it's already been made, and I never want to be influenced by paintings. I prefer to be influenced by movies and by a mood. It's more like a mood. Like I was saying, the last painting I did, I posted on my Instagram. I was telling people when I was composing it, for some reason, all of a sudden, I was into Gone with the Wind, and this whole mood of like this like mist and like those browns. And so, you know, it's just the way it happens. Is there's like a color scheme that comes to my mind, and then I go in there. But it's always from movies, for sure.
Yeah, I can tell with the color scheme, like there's a certain sort of emotional quality that is evoked through the color. And there's a certain sort of intensity to your work, I think, that comes through in your choices of color, many of which are kind of oppositional colors. So they really bounce off one another, and they really bounce off the surface of the canvas. That generates a certain sense of action, I guess, even if the figures are relatively still. Rob, let's go back to that slide one more time, the one with the big clouds and the Maynard Dixon painting, because I wanted to ask you, although maybe you just answered this question, speaking about historical sources, when it comes to clouds in Western art, which you use a lot, and you seem to use them symbolically in a lot of ways, or the clouds themselves in your work have the language of their own. Is Maynard Dixon, or what do you think about, and I bring in Dixon here, I guess, mainly because he shows up, not because necessarily of the direct connection to your work, although I'm curious if there is one, but because he shows up in so many of your contemporaries. And he's such a presence. It shows like the masters and in contemporary Western art generally. You think of Eric Bowman and Brett Ellen Johnson, Howard Post, of course, Logan Ajeej. Even more so than the Taos Society. It seems to me that it's Maynard Dixon often who kind of looms the largest in contemporary Western art today. So is this, and is there something about Dixon's work that speaks to you? Does it have anything to do with the clouds, or you're also welcome to answer that question just by talking about why it is that you think that he is such a presence in contemporary Western art, sort of across the board at this moment. Maynard Dixon is having like a certain sort of revitalization, I think, through artists of your generation, at least, if not actually yourself.
Well, Dixon is, for seeing his show in Scottsdale last year at the Spirit of the West, Dixon is so good because his language for early 1900 is vocabulary is so, the way he draws is so modern for the time that he was doing that, and his composition, his sense of, you can tell that he knows the West, he knows his subject, and he's been there, and he's been feeling what it means to be out there, and so, I think a lot of people take references because he had that way of simplifying, finding, shapes that are, and I'm sensitive to it because I studied animation a lot. And in animation movies, for each movie, art directors are looking for a vocabulary, a certain design that we're gonna adapt. The movie's gonna have that type of design, and such a beautiful work to do that. But funny as it is, when I started to paint Western art, I didn't go that direction. I didn't go to because I've done that in animation so much to just finding the line that tells everything. And but when I started paint Western, I just wanted to make it look like photos because I wanted to be there, and I just wanted to push myself towards that direction. So I went to that direction, instead of something that would be more like Dixon or more simplified, actually like the complexity of everything, and so that's the direction I decided to go. Even though doing something else, I can do something else right now on my canvas, but I like to do that. And so then the clouds, to just answer and finish about the clouds, like my first idea of putting clouds come from actually Richard Prince, his campaign for Marlboro. At the beginning, I learned afterwards that he didn't take the photos, he bought them from this photographer that name. But anyway, this cowboy galloping in the dust, and there's a massive cloud behind, and that's where I get the reference, because when I started to put clouds, I don't think I even knew Maynard Dixon. But then looking at all, Dixon, Edgar Payne, the way they put the clouds, but just being out west, you experience those massive clouds during monsoon, and you have to paint them, like, to me. But I like to be really trying to be as, I don't know, I'm so impressed with clouds when they really happen in front of you, that when I paint them, I want to paint them exactly the way they are, instead of actually simplify them. That's just how I feel about it. But, that's just my personal taste. And I like to push and try to make them as like organic that they actually are in reality.
They're super detailed. I think that's actually one of the real strengths of your work, is that there are a lot of sort of simplified cloud forms, and they dominate Dixon's paintings, of course, but they dominate a lot of paintings, but they dominate yours in a very kind of specific way. They have like so much texture and personality just as shapes. They're so interesting just on their own terms. They're equal parts of the painting. They're equal actors in the painting, I should say, as are the cowboys. So is there some, I remember the master's painting from last year. You said something about there was an opening in the clouds that you said something about being a sign of the eye of God. Is there, how do clouds have that kind of meaning in most of your work? How do you, like, since clouds are so important to you, what role do they play in your paintings beyond just purely the kind of amazing visual phenomena, that they are?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're obviously a magic transition between earth and sky, and they have that capacity to go above, just like birds that we don't. And I don't know, if every time I try composition, and I would try like just a blue sky or purple sky, and then I try clouds. So it's something happening when I put the clouds, and I'm like, all right, it's another one with clouds because it's better. And yeah, there's definitely, I mean, anyone that witnessed a monsoon cloud at sunset knows that there's something beyond. Like it's really mind blowing. So yeah, anyone can put the meanings they want. Yeah, it's heavenly for sure. And I kind of like to use them as that. Yeah, that's connection between the earth and sky, and this passage is like it's bigger than us. So I love it. I love to paint them. That's for sure.
Yeah, they have great depth and just sort of a variety of color even within that one shape. And of course, there's not one shape. There's all kinds of shapes and things going on in your clouds. They're really interesting and sort of independent agents, I think, in your work in their own right. We can move to the last slide, and then I think you've got a couple things in your studio that folks might want to take a look at. This painting is the painting on the right. Is by Howard Terpning, and it's one of his first paintings that he signed Cowboy Artists of America, which makes it a historically significant one. Many of the people on this call perhaps remember from seeing it in John Garrity's living room, longtime Autry trustee, and of course, Masters founder. And the reason that I brought it in here is because it not only, of course, does Terpning remain really sort of like a dominant figure in contemporary Western art, but he's really of the generation that precedes you, yet this is the same narrative. It's John Fremont, the Pathfinder, as he searches for the pass in the Rocky Mountains in the 1840s that will open up the way to California, just a few years before gold is discovered. So it's this very weighty historical moment. And I thought, especially, comparing one of your pictures to, somebody who's really sort of responsible in a lot of ways for the whole resurgence of contemporary Western art, going back to the 1960s and 70s, of course, with the CAA, how it is that you handle narrative, and what kinds of stories do you seek to tell in the paintings, and does narrative even play that significant of a role in your work? Because it certainly did in Terpning's, in the heyday of Terpning's era, and in the work of the cowboy artists. You mentioned James Reynolds. But it seems that contemporary artists, a lot of them, many of your generation, are starting to move gradually away from that. And so I just wonder what your thoughts on are storytelling, the role of storytelling in Western art, and the future of it. Is that relevant, again, as we get further and further in time from these events ourselves?
Well, it's a good question. Personally, I'm really attracted by this, again, because of my cinema background, and I always love to imagine painting is just a moment stopped in time during an action that tells something. And I can only do a certain amount of paintings a year, and narrative paintings, when they're historical and they need to be accurate, they of course take more time. Take more time in research, take more time in staging the references and all that. And so you can only do a few of them because it's so much work. If I was just doing that, I would probably do 3 paintings a year, and that would be difficult. But so I try to make a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 a year where there's a story that is really important, and there's so many events during American history that can be painted. Then I think that maybe the difficulty for some not the difficulty, but it's there's Western art sometimes tend to romanticize. That's how you say it. To give a romantic version of the West sometimes, and maybe some painters and including me don't want to go too far in showing things how they were, and we try to actually give like a better vision of what it is. So yeah, when you look at some Remington paintings, some are really hardcore. He's been painting some really accurate and historical thing in even the dirty side of it. And that's great. That was his time and he was in it, so he was showing it. I think then it's each Western artist is responsible and decide what he wants to show and what he wants to make with his art. And if there's, again, I just did that painting about those black cowboys, and it was a very important thing to me to do because of what was happening and in the society now, and I realized that the black cowboys are not depicted in paintings much, so I all of a sudden I felt like it was my mission to do it. Like I wanted to do it, and I did it, and it's very, very subtle historically, and it's just there's nothing. It's pretty timeless. It could be now, it could be 100 years ago,
Right.
But that was the idea. Like I didn't want to really put it in the time, but I wanted this to be seen as guys, there's black cowboys and there was black cowboys, and there were some of the first cowboys anyway. So yeah, sometimes when there's like something that like talks to me, I really think it's important to show it. And now, like what I'm doing here with the Pueblo native here in Taos, and that's why I moved here mostly, it was to be there and to meet them and to actually push and expand what has been done in terms of Taos, and continuing to show the tradition of what the Pueblo natives were, because some of the a lot of painters did it, but I think we can keep going and doing more and giving back to the community, and it feels right to me to do it this way, and so yeah. When I paint the painting I did for the master this year, it's totally timeless. Again, it's like he's wearing this white sheets that the Pueblo natives are traditionally wearing, and it's just it could be before, it could be now. It shows what it was, it shows what it is, and it doesn't. Everybody can take it the way they want, but if you look at that painting and you start looking back, and then it allows people to maybe open the book and start reading about the Pueblo and try to understand what they wear. And so I don't know. In this way, I feel fine. It's my mission. Sorry, sometimes my English start. When I go too deep, I start like. Sorry about that.
Not at all. Not to worry. Let's go back and take a quick look at that painting of the Black Cowboys then, because I think that's a really cool point. There's a certain Rob, can you pull that slide up again real quick? There's a certain timelessness to all of your work, but to this one in particular, if you think about the significance of adding Black faces into the Western narrative, not only it is at once both historical and contemporary, because of course Black cowboys were there, they just weren't depicted as often as their white counterparts, kind of like the way that Mi in situ reinserts Chinese faces into historical narratives. They were there, they were just erased by a lot of the historical art. And so this painting is both historically authentic and then it's contemporary. And that is an interesting thing about a lot of Western art that I think people tune into, is it is historic at once, and your work really embodies this very, very well. It is something that could be very much of today. So I like the contemporary nod here in these two guys. So when you're looking for, my question about this painting is then, in light of all that, when you're looking for, you say you want to do a painting of Black cowboys and want to stand in solidarity with the focus on Blackness and race that we all were riveted by this summer, and bring more visibility to peoples that have been historically overlooked. how did you find these guys? I mean, they're great models. They know how to ride. How did you go about, getting these guys and putting them into the saddle and constructing this piece?
Well, it's interesting because there's a couple of guys that I already knew from Instagram that are
Oh,
working
cool.
cowboys, black working cowboys, and we were in contact for about 2 or 3 years, and talking about one day I want to shoot you guys because you guys look cool, and they know
Yeah.
how to dress and they have good attitude, and we were really chatting most of the time and exchanging photos about hats, and
Mhm.
and then they were gonna work on a movie here in Santa Fe before COVID. That was like a black cowboy movie produced by Jay-Z, and so we were planning on meeting in March and actually do a shooting, but then COVID happened, the movie got postponed, and so I moved here, and then the events of the summer happened, and really that's when I took my phone and I called Larry, that's the guy with the yellow shirt on the painting, and I was like, man, where are you? He was like, I'm in El Paso, I'm working. I'm like, come to Taos, like come to Santa Fe, let's do it, let's not push,
Cool.
do it. And I'm like, and so I was like, I'll pay for your hotel, and El Rey Hotel in Jeff in Santa Fe, they provide the room, and we're like, okay, let's just do it. And so yeah, my friend Bree, provided the horses, and Percy, the guy on the back, lived here, and he came, and we just did it, and it just happened from like the Tuesday when I decided to do it. We shot on Saturday, and it was on the easel like a week after, because it needed to be done. Like I had the feeling like I want to do something. And then after that, the funny part is that finally they all came for the movie, and so there's like like so many black cowboys down in Santa Fe, and so I did another photo shoot like 2 months ago. Was a lot of them, like it was like 7 guys, and it was amazing. So now I got so many more black cowboy paintings coming up, and I'm super excited about it because those guys are amazing writers, and there's a lot to do. There's a lot of room in museum walls that needs black
Mhm.
cowboys, because we need to give back to history what it really was, and that's my opinion.
Well, I'm really glad you're doing it, because one of the things that we've been talking about in museums for a while, but especially over the summer, is, how is it that we as museums can reflect our communities better? How is it that
Mhm.
we can, show faces and peoples and tell the stories of more people, so that people can relate to what's on the walls, and be able to see themselves, their cultures, and their communities, is part of
Yeah.
the Autry, or any given museum. And
Yeah.
I think, that sort of impulse in you to go out and just do something in response to what's happening now, but in this classic Western way that is what you do, is one of the things that contributes to sort of this timelessness. And it's important, because I think as we get more and more distant from, the historic frontier, and kids care less and less about sort of the myth of the West, um, this makes it relatable in a whole other way. It highlights the significance of these stories, but in
Mhm.
a way that is incredibly relatable to a contemporary audience, whereas the films of, John Ford, or the paintings of Frederick Remington might not be. So let's
Yeah.
just go real quick to the last slide, and then I want to leave a few minutes here for folks to look around your studio with you, if that's okay. All
Oh
right,
yeah.
so this is just a fun thing I threw in here for the end, in case those of us on the call thought you had learned a bunch about Mark, or knew Mark after this experience. This is something from his past as well. And Mark was a photographer. We've talked about photography, of course, in the role of Western art, but there's a lot of work I discovered in looking through images for this purpose of streetwear, fashion photography, models, very urban, very contemporary. So do you want to talk about this at all? And why do you always
Yeah.
carry guns?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, this was actually a steal from a music video.
Oh, cool.
Um, and so yeah, it's this girl's walking in downtown Los Angeles. She's up to no good. So
Clearly.
yeah, well that was I had like I would say a glorious time in French music videos where during like 2008, 2009, 2010, I shot about 100 music videos. It was nonstop because all the music, the label wanted me to shoot their artist, and I was always going to America to shoot, so it's like super exotic. And yeah, I found this language coming from. I mean, I initially discovered America through skateboard. When I was 9 years old, discovered skateboard, and it was 1986, and skateboard was still pretty fresh. And in my hometown in France, there was actually a couple of guys that were skateboarding, and so we had like contests and stuff like that. And so that was my first. And then when I was 15, I traveled to America with my uncle. That's all I was after. That's when I discovered the Grand Canyon and Monument Valley. But at the time, I didn't care. I was just like, oh yeah, that's cool. But I want to go to LA because I want to get the skateboard shoes and get some decks. And that's all I was into. But then, 20 years later, the Grand Canyon came back to haunt me. But anyway, I had that language, the visual language of street and skate for so long. And when I started doing music videos and all that was my influence. And so I was shooting everything that's like subculture, the most trash and on the age possible. I've done a lot of crazy stuff, but it was cool. There was a time I was young. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, I like some of the early photographs because there's one thing that I could tell from those which I found. They're always all the women have pistols. I don't know if that was like a film thing or what, but a lot of they're like carrying guns or rifles, and not like just any gun or rifle, but like the old school kind of pistols that you might see in a Western film or something like that. So there's like a whole Women and Guns by Mark Maggiori show, I think that we need to do before long. But since you are in your studio and it's a newly built one, and this is a cool thing, not everybody gets to see an artist's studio. Maybe you can show us around a little bit and just give us a tour. We can check out the master's
it's nighttime because I wish I could have shown you the Taos Mountains because they are right there. So I have a big window here that doesn't look, because it's dark outside. But so yeah, I got my easel here. And there's a painting on the easel right now that is for the Scottsdale Art Auction in April. I'm starting on it. It's not really advanced. Here I have all my stuff, my paints and all. This was my, I was working before the call, so that's my mixing table. And then here there's a little salon for meetings and having a little wine in the evening. That's the meeting table. I have a bunch of gear there for writing and a nice bench. That's a painting that goes to another show by Black Cowboys. I can show it. And here is my master painting. I can show you the scale. It's pretty big. It's as tall as me.
So that goes up to, that's like is that 60 inches? About
with the frame, it's 65 by 65. So
that's
yeah,
a big painting.
It's pretty big. I have to ship that to you guys. It's a mission. So yeah, and then that's my little room where I draw. And too bad I can't show you, but exit here, and this is the Taos Mountains. But it's dark. We have a lot of snow outside. It's pretty.
Yeah, I bet that's beautiful with the snow in the mountains, and then you get that light in the late evening.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is awesome. And you just built this, right? It's newly built.
Yeah. I transformed a 3-car garage into this. It was a big project. We started to build it in May, and it's been there for now 2 months. Wow. So it took like a few months, but cool. I'm stoked. It's like an achievement of a lifetime to have your own space. It's pretty awesome.
Well, it sounds like you have, found your place, not just in the art world, but, physically in the universe.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense that you're there in Taos on land that the Taos Society and also your Academy Julian colleagues once traversed. Yeah. So, you're in good company. And Next time I get to come out there, hopefully it won't be that much longer. I'm gonna knock on your door for sure.
Let's cross fingers. We can all get back to normal sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think we have a few minutes left for Q&A, and I see some in the chat, so I'm just gonna read them out. This first one is from an anonymous attendee, and it says, the transition from French musician to American cowboy artist is impressive and inspiring. How did you create your art market, and what specific challenges have you overcome?
Well, the funny part is that everything came pretty naturally. I didn't try to do anything. It just happened. And so, yeah, I was in a band because when I was 20, I liked playing music, and that's what I wanted to do. And then when I was 40, I wanted to paint and be out there in the West. So it's just, during a lifetime, you go through so many. I mean, some people do the same thing all their life, but some also are looking for things. And I think my old path was to come here, and it took me 20 years from being out of school to actually building my studio in Taos. It took 20 years, but during 20 years I went through so many things and so many experiences that built a personality and built a desire and built also a way of doing things. I've made mistakes in the past that I haven't made now, because I've learned so much from being in a band, directing movies, all that. I've learned a lot about everything, all aspects of being an artist, from like making good art, but also marketing, making a living. All that is also a part of being an artist. And so I think it's just experience and hard work that brings you to all the different stages in life. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think it does. I mean, it's obviously been quite a journey, and one that has taken you, although not by design, I think, to exactly where you were meant to be. Here's another. What do you appreciate? This is from Jenny. What do you appreciate overall about the Masters audience and your experience at the Autry?
Oh, well, it was always such an amazing experience. Well, first of all, it was next door. I was living 5 minutes from the Autry. That was fun. And I don't know, it's a very, very amazing show with so many great artists. And I remember, to me, it was also a personal victory, because it's the first show that I witnessed. So in 2014, I visited. I was living in Arizona when I really started to paint, and Logan Ajej told me about the Autry, and I was in contact with him back then, and he was like, "You should come to LA to see the Masters. It's a great show if you wanna." And he told me, he's like, "I think there's room for you in this kind of show." And I was really at the beginning. I probably had made like 3 paintings back then, and so I drove to LA, and he told me, you have to dress, because you have to put a suit in the evening. He didn't say it was in the evening, so I show up at like 10 a.m. with my suit, and I had short hair back then, and I was like, oh, like preppy and nice, and I was like, no, that's this evening. I'm like, oh, whatever. But so I didn't pay to get to go through the whole thing, but I just in the morning went through everything and scanned everything and looked at all the art, and I was like, damn, I want to be in this show. And so yeah, 3 years after, when you guys invited me to the show, it was like a very personal, it was super, super cool to feel that I was finally part of it, when it appeared such a dream the first time I came, and I thought it would take me, I don't know, years to get there, but so it's pretty awesome. But I hope that, I don't know about this year, but I'm looking forward to now travel to LA to come to the Masters. That's going to be fun.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we can. We are definitely doing the in-person show. I think your painting will be featured prominently. And we do hope that folks can come in and see it, at least in small groups or individuals, collectors, couples, that kind of thing, because the experience of the art itself is really what people love about Masters. And that is hard to recreate online. But I think it was Logan who introduced me to, we really have Logan to thank for a lot of
Oh
things.
yeah,
I think he said to
for a
me,
lot
like,
of things,
you
for
gotta check
sure.
this guy out. And he sent me an image, and then not there long after, I was at your studio.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep. Okay, there's another question here. This is also from Anonymous. I love the vivid color palette that you used in last year's Autry Master Show. This year's work appears more muted. Is your palette changing?
Well, I have to say that if you compare the saturation on the yellows on that painting of this year and the one last year with all the horses, it's way more saturated. So that's my specialized eye. The Vermilion, the Vermilion cliff painting last year that you showed in the slide was pretty saturated, but this one in person, maybe the photo doesn't, but in person, this painting is very saturated. Like the yellows on the, and in the clouds, and the horse is bright yellow. So this is like total like Taos sunset, and the authenticity of the colors is stronger because now this is home. Like what I'm painting is my home. Like this mountains in the back is my backyard. I see it every morning, every night. So things get more and more close and more sensitive and close to me. So yeah, the colors are the colors. I'm very happy with that piece personally.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it in person. As I'm sure a lot of people on this call also feel the same about that. One last quick question. Speaking of being virtual, what have been the benefits of virtual life? How has your life changed during COVID, and if so, how or not? Obviously, you've moved.
Well, my life has changed this.
Somewhere.
Well, my life changed this year because I moved to Taos. So of course, and it was honestly a good timing. We didn't plan on it before because we knew we were gonna move in March. That was planned from a long time, but then it was the beginning of the pandemic, so it kind of worked out pretty good. But personally, nothing has changed. I mean, I'm like everybody, suffering from non-social activity. I'm longing to see people and have dinner parties and go in a concert, and I'm thinking the whole world is in the same situation. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's been a blessing that we actually have that possibility. I mean, for me, I have two daughters in France that every year I visit them, 2 times a year, and we go to vacation. And this year, right now, it's been a year I haven't seen them. And it's hardcore, but because every day we see each other on FaceTime, it's doable. Imagine this pandemic would have happened 30 years ago, it would have been a nightmare because you can't see anybody. So we should be grateful for this, that we can actually see each other and talk and feel close to each other, even though we can't see each other. So that's the positive part. And yeah, museums and events and everybody. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about how everybody adapted to the situation, so quick. Like museum being able to do, tours, like exhibitions, concert, artists playing live. Like it's amazing. Like humans have like a capacity of adaptation, which is remarkable. Like it's insane. It just took us a year, and now everybody's like online doing their thing. And it's awesome. So that's cool. Positive.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and actually a really great note to end on is that, if we didn't have these digital tools that are enabling this very conversation and so many other things, this whole pandemic would be yet another
way harder
of awful. So
yeah, so that's the positive aspect.
That's the positive thing. Yeah, this technology, and we grumble about Zoom fatigue and all of it. it really is allowing us to keep in touch in ways that we couldn't have even 20 years ago. So that
Exactly.
is a great note to end on. Thank you for all of the time that you spent with us this evening, and to everybody who's been on this call. If you'd like to learn more about Masters of the American West, you just visit the autry.org/masters. And please join us on Wednesday, January 6th, for another conversation with the artist Diane Whitehawk and the Autry's own Joe Horsecapture. And then with me again, 1 week later on January 13th, with another Masters artist, the Dene painter, Tony Abeda. So happy holidays, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. Thank you to Mark. That was really a great, fascinating insight into your world. And we'll see you next year.